In my previous videos, I have mentioned several times that the current Mars plot over in Honkai 3 Part 2 has many similarities to Amphoreus. Due to popular demand, I have decided to make this video to summarize said Mars plot from Chapter 1 to 7 and elaborate on how similar these two plots are to each other. Of course, this means this video contains spoilers for Mars up to Chapter 7, so take care if you don't want to be spoiled for that. Well, for one, instead of a lion and a goat, Mars has a lion and a deer responsible for their day-night cycle. That, and because both works fundamentally took inspiration from Asimov's The End of Eternity and Nietzsche's concept of eternal return. Right off the bat, just as you start Chapter 1 of Mars, one of the first readables you can get is Elysium Mythology Special Edition, in which the main character saw a manuscript once within a dream. He could not remember what it was, so he sought the script in his dream for the rest of his life. He could never find that script again, but in his final moment in an accident, through communicating with other souls, he discovered that the script was actually, in plain terms, his fate, which was imposed upon him across space and time by the spiritual progenitor of humanity, and by humanity, the text means Martians, Earthlings not included. The text went on to say that as an individual, a single human cannot reach the truth of the divine, and lives in the false narrative of lies. It is only when humans have, in plain terms, returned to their collective consciousness that they can reach the truth and can be spoken in the same breath as the divine. Now, if you are familiar with the project stigma of Honkai 2 and 3, you probably already knew where this is going. To defend against the Honkai, the Martians have, in fact, gone through with their proverbial project stigma, merging their collective consciousness together and sinking eternally into a shared dream maintained by a big quantum computer. The entire Mars plot is a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream inside said big quantum computer connected to the sea of quanta. Yes, it's the Inception again. As such, the contents of each lore book listed here are only at best dreamlike reinterpretations of the truth and are not necessarily what actually happened in the real history of Mars. Effectively, they are about as trustworthy as the Amphoreus mythologized versions of their history and Genshin's folktale retelling. It's not completely correct, but there is also a hidden truth to be unveiled from it. For ease of understanding, I will be noting the context of each lore and event within their respective dream layers so that everyone can keep track of what's happening in each dream layer. Also, I would like to note that the Mars plot is ongoing, and due to the Inception plot it is going on, the timeline is murky as hell. As such, the following recap of the Mars timeline and plot is merely a speculation, albeit coupled with evidence to the best of my ability. With the limited information from Chapter 1 to 7, some events might be out of the actual chronological order of later canon, so you might want to keep that in mind. At the start of the story, you are the Dream Seeker, a mysterious being that emerged without any memory from the Sea of Data in Oxia City. This is not an uncommon occurrence in Oxia, and its citizens believe that they are in a bubble world floating inside the Sea of Quanta, which, in Honkai Star Rail, is the Nihility River. Unbeknownst to them and to you, however, Oxia is only part of a simulated world inside a supercomputer, mimicking the dead civilization of Mars. Since emerging from the sea, you, the Dream Seeker, have become a student of Xihe, your senior in research, and your research topic was the Sea of Data. One day, you fell asleep reading a book, and just like Alice in Wonderland, you are drawn into a dream. In the dream, you are on a spaceship, viewing Mars from above. A strange girl tells you that Mars is a planet-sized tomb for civilizations, and that its current civilization is merely an illusion. The speaker has been asleep for a long time, until you woke her up by falling into this dream. The next thing you know, you are in the Sea of Data, and the strange girl tells you that you will form a covenant with her to save civilization. You touch the doorway, and arrived at a strange place. The girl now stands before you. You don't know this yet, but she is your destined other half, Ena. From now on, I will call this place Dream Layer 0. In Layer 0, Ena explains to you that you are dreaming of her, and she has been waiting for you all this time. Your time are not synchronized, but you won't understand what this means until Chapter 7 EX. Instead of answering your questions, Ena asked you to dance with her, so that she can show you the truth. Being the secret disaster lesbian you are, on the same level as Hamuro Akemi, in fact, you agree. As you danced with her, she showed you a dice. In the dice is the Mars simulation, the false sky, a crater, the illusionary rice field, a peach forest, and the tree that you once planted together with her, but you don't know this yet. Lava bursted out from the volcanoes. Ena dances among the ruins of a civilization, and a protoplanet, much like Earth's Theia, is crashing toward her planet. She stands alone amidst the fire, and Mars is turned into an ocean of magma by presumably the southern giant impact. The dance ends, and she asks you to listen to the sea of fire. At the end, she asks you to form a covenant with her, and because of you, the future of civilizations will transcend time and space, creating infinite possibilities. She explains to you that to her, you are her future, and to you, she is your past. After you, no one will meet her again. You are the final reverberation of this world, where time is frozen. Your world is only a glimmer of her world, in a small corner of the sea of quanta called the Sea of Data. She believes that with this covenant between you two, you will save the world and the souls of everyone. Her authority, which is presumably origin since she is the unwoven cocoon, lies at the end of the world, where it will shepherd that soul light, which is you, who is, presumably, finality. She gave you her name and the final blessings bestowed upon humanity by the world, the astral rings, the swan song of both heaven and earth. At the end, you finally find out what your name is. Entropy. As she fades into petals, the astral rings, which look awfully like the anchor of apocalypse in Oxia, start to glow, and the dream ends. You wake up hitting your head on the floor of the Sea of Data. You meet Ena again, along with two aliens from Earth, Helia and Coralie. For Ena, this one has blue eyes, and she doesn't have any memory whatsoever. She has some instinctual knowledge of the astral rings, language, Mars, and you, but she doesn't remember you. You have fallen out of the dice that the dream Ena showed you in her dance. Apparently, you were entwined with this Ena before you fell out. Helia and Coralie tell you that they got lost in the Sea of Quanta, which isn't wrong, but it's also not the whole truth. They touched a terminal while discovering the ruins of Mars and got sucked into the Mars simulation, but they don't want you to know this just yet. Like Alice in Wonderland, you all end up chasing a dog across the Sea of Data and falling into a pool of shadows for it. And like Alice, all of you ended up in Wangshu, the other half of Oxia, split off from Oxia during the Great Eruption by the Sevensu, the equivalent of the Hershare and the Chrysos heirs in Mars. Unbeknownst to you, this is only the first dream layer. In the long chill of Dream Layer 1, you meet Songque, whose real name is actually Maria. She only changed her name to Songque so that she would fit in more with the Chinese-inspired Phoenix continent locals and people would believe her as a fortune teller. Songque is a scammer on Amber Street and also one of the Seven Su, the Su of Deception. 100 years ago, as the shadow calamities threatened Antares, the leader of the Seven Shu, Baiji, cooked up a plan with the astral rings. He believed that by gathering 7 people who can conquer the 7 rules of the shadows, as in the Martian version of Hershare, ruler of the Honkai authorities, they can artificially create one law, an artificial god for Antares that can control the shadows, so basically a Hershare of finality. However, his plan was a bit different from Earth, which entrusted the authority of finality to Kiana and believed in her ability to control it. With the Rite of Tears, the one law was supposed to be created by the sacrificial golden scapegoat Songque, who would gather all the fears of Antares into one person and manifest the law with her death, completing the astral ring from 7 pieces. Fortunately, 100 years ago, Baiji chickened out of his own plan. He saw his dead sister in Songque weigh too much and couldn't kill her. As a result, he and the rest of Su decided to sacrifice themselves instead, sealing themselves and the 7 rules they represented in a deep sleep with 7 nails, which pin the pool of shadows above Wangshu, allowing the citizens to use the shadows for their own gain, but also delaying the arrival of the shadows for the next 100 years. In addition, they also split off Oxia from Antares, leaving Wangshu as the half of the city mired in the shadows, while the other half, Oxia, escaped, and became the prosperous high-tech city that you found yourself in. For Songque, she keeps running away from her fated death, continuing to scam people on Amber Street for survival, lying to herself so that she can enjoy life for one more day, for 100 years. Accompanying her is Perception, a gadget given to her by the Shu of Gadget, Ajita. Perception and Ajita told Songque that Perception held one part of Ajita's soul, which is the force behind its artificial intelligence. This is true, but it's also not the whole truth. For 100 years, the scammer Songque doesn't realize yet that she herself is being scammed. Luckily for her, one day, she lost Perception to the shadows in a fight, but unluckily for her, with your help, Perception made its way back to Songque once more. To kickstart its plan, Perception unlocked a nail, releasing one of the 7 rules of calamities that had been sealed by the Suu 100 years ago. In addition, it manipulated Duanique, the dog that baited your group to chase after it, to unlock another nail. With the gradual unsealing of the shadows, a repeat of the Great Eruption is bound to happen. Meanwhile, in your haste to get back to Oxia, Ena accidentally activated the Anchor of Apocalypse, the teleporter that connects between Oxia and Wangshu. In Oxia, people believe that the Anchor of Apocalypse was a dangerous item created by the calamities during the Great Eruption, but judging from how Ena could activate it and how it looks suspiciously like the necklace that she gave you in your final farewell, it's pretty safe to say that Ena or you as Layla likely created the anchor with your power to anchor these illusionary bubble worlds in the sea of data. But that's a story for later. For now, with your return to Oxia, you and your friend group unknowingly lead the shadows back to Oxia. So now if the eruption arrives, both Wangshu and Oxia will be cooked in one go, rendering the initial split meaningless. Desperate, your group and Songque went to check on the other Suu to see if they had awakened or not. They had, and all the nails are coming undone. Baiji's original plan of sacrificing the golden scapegoat Songque becomes the only remaining option left. However, all hope is not lost. Baiji managed to use your ability of seeing the future in dreams to sneak a peek at the fake ending one, in which he tried to follow through with his plan instead of doing detective work on who was behind the reemergence of the calamities this time. In the fake ending one, Perception, which is revealed to be the will of the shadows merged with a fraction of Ajita's soul, is the mastermind, stealing back the authority of the shadows from the Suu and extracting the debt the people of Wangshu had owed her all this time for using the shadows. At the end of Fake Ending 1, Perception wipes out Wangshu, and it's game over. Although, to be fair, as it was later revealed in Chapter 3, Perception is just doing her job, and with her win, she just continually locks them in the same cycle over and over again, not actually decimating them. Fortunately, it's just a dream of premonition in your head, or is it? But for now, Baiji brushed it off as your special ability and hatched a plan to counter Perception. Inspired by Lantern's straightforward attitude and Ongche's false optimism, he planned on letting Perception materializing before the deadline first as an evil god of shadows, and Lantern, being the only Suu that became a Suu on her own human power, would defeat the new evil god-given form. Unfortunately, that's just wishful thinking, and Songque knew this. She asked Baiji for permission to enact the Rite of Tears on her own just in case Lantern failed, and he agreed, handing her the astral rings. As such, in the critical moment when Lantern was about to be defeated by Perception, Songque chose to sacrifice herself, compiling all 7 pieces of the astral ring into the one law, throwing the power of the sun against the god of the shadows, winning the war and disintegrating herself in the process. At the end of Fake Ending 2, Songque recompiled herself from the pieces, inviting you to a party celebrating the victory over the shadow calamities. This is where the current Amphoreus plot is at as of 3.2, the first layer of the dream. In a note she didn't send to you, she revealed that originally there were 2 star princesses, a white star and a black star. The black star tricked the white star to go down to Earth and leave her white crown in the sky to the black star. The white star went down to Earth and fulfilled the wish of a young girl who refused to wish for her sister's return from the dead. Instead, she wished for her dead sister to become a star that shines only for herself. The next morning, the dead sister has returned from the dead, walking toward the cabin and holding flowers with morning dews on them. The Black Star had stolen the White Star's crown and did evil things in her name, such as resurrecting the dead sister of the young girl. After accompanying the young girl for her lifetime, the White Star was given undying light and regained her power. The Black Star, whose scheme was exposed, was banished from heaven and turned into a real stone. If you have caught up to Layla's reveal, you would know that it's actually false, considering how down bad she is for Ena, but this is presumably how Layla viewed herself. It's all very Hamura Akemi. The White Star is obviously Ena, whose power fueled the astral ring system and who gave her power, the proverbial white crown, to Layla in their farewell. The young girl who wished upon the stars is a combined figure of Songque, who recompiled the power of the astral ring to create the One Law in Dream Layer 1, and her master, Baiji, whose sister's death compelled him to seek immortality in the Dream Layer 3. And the Black Star who stole the White Star's power to conduct evil deeds and resurrect the dead is, of course, Layla, the identity of the Dream Seeker, your true self. And for the record, you did, in fact, turn into stone for real in Dream Layer 3. You wake up. Welcome to reality by Vita, who is a clone of Sua, the evil female version of Sua from Venus. She is actually also Sparkle's strip poker friend and a masked fool, a status given to her by Sparkle. For her personality and backstory, you can imagine Vita to be a cursed love child of Anaxa, Sparkle, and Harry Potter. She is very suspicious, likes to troll people, and wants to be the center of the narrative every time she's on stage. As Vita trolls you through the plot twist reveal, slowly, you start to remember that you are just a simulation in a machine. The dream premonition power of yours that Baiji used to unveil Perception's ploy is actually just you literally going through endless cycles of the same story of the Seven Su. Up until now, you hadn't managed to clear the first stage yet. Every single time, you always failed, Songque was always killed, and Perception always won, locking everyone in the same fake dream, until this cycle, when Ena managed to support everyone and the astral ring system into winning against Perception, clearing the stage. However, not all is well. Ena is gone. As in, entirely gone from the record, gone from the memories of the Earth friends in the same cycle with you, Helia and Coralie, gone from the recording of the computer system itself, and even gone from the observation of Vita and the Moon base, who exist outside of the Mars computer system. Heartbroken by the loss of Ena, you are determined to go back into the game and clear the upper levels, this time with Vita's dubious support as a hacker. For readers of The End of Eternity, you can clearly see by now that the story of Mars and its eternal return powered by a supercomputer is also a big reference to Asimov's The End of Eternity, in the exact same vein as Elysian Realm and the Amphoreus plot. In The End of Eternity, the Eternity was an organization of time travelers that existed outside of time. They considered themselves as the wise and played gods with the timelines, pruning timelines as they see fit in a utilitarian fervor to ensure humanity will progress in the most efficient way possible. One of them, the technician Andrew Harlan, fell in love with a local time woman named Noise Lambent. But because affairs were forbidden in the Eternity, and her timeline was destined to be pruned by the Eternity, he decided to hide her away in a backdoor, a hidden future section of time. However, one day, the section of time he hid her in was blocked by a wall, and he could not go back to her again. Harlan suspected that his organization was behind it, and throughout the novel, Harlan attempted many things to get back to her, including manipulating the senior computer, Twistle, and threatening to delete the existence of the Eternity if they harm her. Long story short, he found her again in the end, and was convinced by her to delete the Eternity anyway so that the future could expand into infinity. Thus, the end of the Eternity is the beginning of the infinity, and now you know why the Flame Chasers, in both Elysian Realm and Amphoreus, are fated to be deleted for the sake of the future. As simulations, they represent the meaningless utilitarian existence promoted by the Eternity, fated to be erased so that the romantic, hopeful future of Noy Lambert could come true. At the same time, Noy Lambert is very obviously Alicia, Seriously, if you read the novel, you'll see that their mannerism is exactly the same. And it's not just manners. The whole hiding Noi Lambert away in a hidden section of the future is referenced by Alicia, who also waited for May in a hidden section of the future behind a back door. Only that the role of the technician Harlan was split between Vil V the technician and Raiden May in Honkai 3. Presumably, the exact same plot is ongoing between Cyrene, March, and the MC in Amphoreus, with Cyrene being the half of March hidden in the blocked-off section of the past. The MC is the technician Harlan, trying to find our way back to the Noi Lambert of Amphoreus, the Cyrene of the past, once more. For Mars, it's also the exact same plot, as spelled out in the Elysium mythology readable. Like Amphoreus, the main character, Yu is also Harlan the technician trying to find our way back to our own Noi Lambent, Ena, across time. She is waiting for you in the past samsara of Mars. One day, she will return and take back her authority, the White Crown and the Astral Ring system, from the evil black star that turned to stone. Who is you? Or so you believe. In the Dream Layer 2, you are not alone. Accompanying you is the Twistle of the story, Vita. Unlike Asimov's Twistle, who is high-strung from his job and wants to close the loop so that the eternity will continue to exist, Vita is a smug snake, knows more than she reveals, and is very invested in breaking the samsara to unveil the truth of Mars, more akin to someone we know in Amphoreus than anything else. When you open your eyes, you are instantly arrested by your old senior researcher, Xihe, and end up in jail. There, you meet Songque again, who revealed that the whole Dream Layer 1 is actually an old story she made up, based on people she knew in her real life. Just that in Dream Layer 2, Lidist and Baiji died in the same fire, Seraphim lost contact with Songque, and the rest never existed. Instead of becoming the heroic sacrificial scapegoat, Songque became a scammer who could only eke out a living by deceiving people on the street. In other words, beyond the fake endings of Dream Layer 1, the power of the White Star Princess is still not recompiled. The Mars simulation is still stuck in a samsara under the command of the Black Star Princess, and Songque is still stuck in jail, prevented from doing her sacrificial ritual. As you break out from jail, with Songque's help, Songque changed into her sacrificial dress and presumably was preparing to recompile the power of the One Law once more with her own death in the Rite of Tears. However, you ditch her halfway through to find the Anchor of Apocalypse, which is actually just bait by Vita to piss off the real you, the Black Star Princess Layla. You had a nervous breakdown, overwhelmed with the emotions of the real you in the machine, and the dream ended. In the third dream layer, you open your eyes to a happy dream, in which everyone is alive and successful in a high-tech Oxia. Longqiao and Oxia are never split apart. Bai Ji is the rich heir of the Bai family and doggedly wants to buy Lidist's dog with the power of money. Lidist is the street performer with his partner Duanique. Tholima is the manager of the successful actress Songque, who gained fame through her rendition of the White Star Princess. Lantern is still in debt, but she's a maid-in-a-maid cafe staff as well. Seraphim is a highly successful writer seeking inspiration for her new stories. Accompanying you is the troll, Vita, and Teresa, the overseer of destiny on Earth. Like usual, you all chase after Duanique as Alice in Wonderland and meet all the characters in their new lives. You and Teresa are happy, but Vita is not. At first, she tolerates what she calls playing house, but as the dream progresses, she starts to introduce disorder into the story in the hope of waking up Layla, the real you. She told Seraphim your story and Ena, which became the readable Did You Write Today? This readable will become important later. Then, Vita goes to meet Perception alone in an attempt to force a confrontation with Ajita, but she doesn't get what she wishes for, destroys the place, and throws her future colleague into a trash can. By the time the day ends, Vita has completely lost her patience and decides to introduce this happy dream to the apocalypse. Summoning her mecha, she destroyed Oxia's infrastructure, sowing the fear that the apocalypse is coming back. This fear, as Vita intends, will summon the Shadow Calamity, which will piss off the real you enough that you will show up to kick her out. And exactly as planned by Vita, Layla, the real you, appears, materializing out of golden blood. With a flick of your finger, you, the current goddess of Mars, and the third dream layer abruptly, banning Vita's account from the system. It is here that you start to understand who you really are. As the Dream Seeker Entropy, who are effectively an amnesiac section of Layla's subconsciousness while she sleeps. Layla, whose name means the night, is the Martian goddess of the night, in contrast to Ena, the glow of faith, who is the Martian goddess of the day. With Ena missing from the record, Layla is currently the only god of Mars, overseeing every aspect of the supercomputer, including the shadow calamities. In order to find Ena again, Layla has set up this samsara system inside the computer and created this shadow calamity crisis across dream layers for herself, you, the Dream Seeker. According to Vita, for an unknown reason, Layla believes that by turning back time, she could find Ena again back at the start of the story, when Layla herself had not become God yet. If only I hadn't become some god, would I have lost everything? What did I say? Very Hamura Akemi. The fourth dream layer is the Tenso War, which is the very obvious equivalence of the Chrysos War in Amphoreus. Instead of 13 core flames, the competitors have to compete for 10 plagues and the position of Tensu. The normal people are told that winning a slot for the final competition means that they would gain immortality from the god, and they and their families would be able to relocate to Rumuk, the prosperous city where God resides. Incidentally, Limuk is the name of several species of tree, usually Corylopsis multiflora or Cornus alba, but in this case, it's obviously the peach tree that Ena and Layla planted together when Ena was still in the simulation. However, moving to Ruemu isn't the entire truth. In reality, as Litist has planned since the first Tensu War, the Suu, who wins the championship, is supposed to kill Litist and replace him as Layla's knight, thereby ending Layla's attachment to her caretakers, allowing her to become a true independent god of Mars. Unfortunately for Litist, right before the first war began, his musing was overheard by Layla without his knowledge. This happens, of course, right after another companion of hers, Nahabra, chose to meet her end. Layla lost the final gift that Ena gave her in their farewell, and Layla started to realize that she was forgetting Ena. As a result of this chain of events, Layla rightfully perceived this decision as an abandonment by her only surviving caretaker. She got mad and was consumed by the shadow that she was supposed to control, triggering the shadow calamities that are pervasive in every dream layer in the Mars computer. For Litist, his plan was busted, and every single war he organized after the first ended in Layla rejecting all the candidates and refusing to show up. She has turned herself into literal stone and locked herself in the Ruemu Tower, neglecting her duty as the god of Mars in favor of retracing Ena's footsteps in the past again with the Dreamseeker system. After the failure of the first war, Litist tried to 32 more wars afterwards, but midway through the timeline, the candidates started to go insane and attack people randomly, which prompted Litist to kill them, which prompted even more combatants joining the fight because they want to seek revenge for their loved ones in the past war. However, it wasn't until the 33rd war that things went completely off the rail. As you, the Dream Seeker, your Earth friends, and the troll from Venus land in the 4th dream layer, you discover that the Suu you know from the 1st dream layer are all competitors of the 33rd war. Specifically, they were the finalists, albeit missing 3 from their rank, since it's supposed to be a Tensu war, not a 7su war. We don't really know what happens next since the next chapter hasn't been released yet, but we do know that Baiji, the leader of the Suu in the Dream Layer 1, was handpicked by Litist to be his killer and the final champion of the Suu War. There's a reasonable chance that in the 33rd war, Litist was, in fact, successfully killed, since in Dream Layer 2, Songque's story claimed that they both died in the same fire, so presumably, they took each other out, leaving no Litist but also no survivor to become Layla's new knight. And, well, I think it's quite obvious that Layla specifically picked the finalists for the 33rd Suu War and not the first to repeat endlessly in her Dream Layer 1 game mode for a reason. It's the specific version of the war that she doesn't want to end, and the version that she desperately wants to redo. Presumably, in the 33rd war, Ajita, like Perception in the fake ending one of Dream Layer 1, hijacked the entire thing, and Songque became the unexpected hero who held her back at the last minute with her sacrifice. But you and your friends don't know this yet. As you interact with the dream layer and change some aspects of the past, you draw the attention of Ajita, who is revealed to be the back-end developer of the Mars system. Being stuck in the samsara of Mars for literally thousands of years, she is, in fact, itching for a chance to escape this samsara once and for all, and you are her golden chance to do so. Repeating the exact same Buddhist theme as Hou, Yi, and Vita, Ajita laughs madly and rejoices when she arrives on the moon base as a hologram. Several in-game characters have lampshaded about this, stating that Ajita and Vita are like long-lost sisters. And, well, that might as well be correct. Like Hou, whose name is actually a reference to Xihe, the Buddhist concept of the material world, and who wanted to escape from the samsara by achieving enlightenment. Hou, who has obvious Buddha theme under the tree theme, and actually did escape from the samsara by achieving enlightenment. Vita, who is a sprout of Soa, and has the same plot of escaping the samsara as Hou and Soa, and Anaxa, whose full name is a reference to the Bodhisattva, and whose plot also revolves around achieving enlightenment by merging with a tree and being the guidance of people to escape from the samsara. Ajita, despite the different Chinese characters, is a reference to another name of the Buddha Maitreya, and her plot also revolves around, you guess it, escaping from the samsara by merging with a tree and achieving enlightenment. In addition, a Purusha woman from Venus has visited Mars in the past, and well, Hou and Vita are from Venus. So yeah, they may or may not turn out to actually be long-lost sisters for a given definition of sisters. At the very least, Ajita is very much an XP of Hou, and Vita, and the equivalents of Anaxa and Mars, which begs the question, if Ajita wants to escape the samsara by hijacking the power of God, then would Anaxa, who actually did try to merge himself with Kephale to hijack the power of God, try to do the same when he actually becomes God in the next samsara? After all, as Odin and Nietzsche's Zarathustra, he really is poised to become the sinner responsible for the destruction of heaven and the death of the heroes, for the ring cycle, and thus spoke Zarathustra. And we still don't know what he means by the caduceus spell on his hand means yet. Food for thought. The whole MC traveling back in time after the first layer ends to find Cyrene again is pretty certain, at least, as is MC being the amnesiac shadow of the dreaming god, Cows, the previous Kephale. For more information on Amphoreus' timeline, please check my previous video about the goats, Silent Acapo, for more details. But for Mars, God is dead. God remains dead, and the other god has locked herself in a tower. As you, the god of the night, the Black Star Princess, continues to dream the other aspect of you. The technician of this rendition of the end of eternity travels back in time to uncover the truth and find Senedina again. You slowly start to piece together the truth of this world, before it dies and was resurrected as a simulation. In the first dream layer, the Phoenix continent of Mars is divided between two bubble worlds connected to each other by the anchor of Apocalypse. Originally, the two bubble worlds were one, Antares, but during the Calamity of the Shadows, which is basically the Honkai eruption with Mars flavored, the band of heroes called Tensu gained the rules over the shadows and sacrificed themselves to save half of the bubble world. As a result of their action, Antares split off into Oxia and Longqiu, with Oxia being the shadow-free world and Longqiu being the shadow-infested half. And it is in the high-tech developed Oxia that we found the books detailing the history of the Phoenix continent on Mars. According to ancient history of the Phoenix continent, the civilization on Mars was yet another space sci-fi version of China, with its history staying relatively close to the history of real-life China, albeit with a few significant deviations. The first three dynasties of Mars, Fang, Xin, and Qing, are obvious nods to the first three dynasties of China, Xia, Song, and Zhou. The real-world inspiration for Fang, the Xia dynasty, was the legendary first dynasty of China and, according to the myths, was the dynasty to leave behind Rinsan, the first of the three divination texts used in the I Ching, a fact that was referenced in Genshin by the Lansan domain, which was built by a still unknown civilization in the sea area. Hence, in Mars, Thao was the creator of the divination system used in the Phoenix continent. Feng, which means room, is an ancient Chinese astrological mansion. The second dynasty Xin, which means heart, is also named after an ancient Chinese astrological mansion. Like in real life with the first dynasty Xia and the second dynasty Song, the rulers of Xin were not part of the first dynasty but were, according to the myths, which are actually pretty contested in real life, mind you, a neighboring trading tribe who usurped the Xia rulers. It's based on the Song dynasty, which invented the Chinese sexagenary cycle, commonly known in the West as the Chinese zodiac and calendar system. Hence, Xin did the exact same thing in fantasy Mars. In addition, the Song dynasty of real life was known for their strong economy and commerce. In fact, they actually named themselves as Song, which means commerce. Just like in real life, at the end of the Song dynasty, Old Chinese, the real-life equivalent of the world language in Mars, started to emerge in the area under the control of an important vassal state of Song, Zhou, which would eventually replace Song. In Genshin, the second dynasty Song is represented by Weizhong rule and Herglizang domain, which is the second of the three divination texts in the Yi Jing after Lansan. The third dynasty Xing, which means star, is another ancient Chinese astrological mansion. Xing's real-life inspiration is Zhou, which overthrew Song and mandated their own custom and language to be the standard for the Chinese civilization at the time. The Zhou language became Old Chinese, which is the common ancestor for all modern Chinese languages and dialects 5,000 years later. As the usurper of Song, Zhou tried their best to erase Song contributions and was responsible for most of the slanders against Song that got passed down into the modern day. Positioning themselves as the rulers of morality and customs, Zhou enacted elaborate rituals and rules on the music and arts to justify their rules against the more pragmatic Song, which had already dropped most of the fanfare before they got deposed. Nevertheless, because of their very successful propaganda, up until the modern day, when people managed to dug up actual contemporary texts and archaeological evidences that poked quite a few holes in the heart of Zhou version of the story, historically, Confucius, who was actually born later in the spring and autumn period, Chinese Confucianism, and historians alike revere Zhou for the establishment of the Chinese Code of Conducts, which are codified in the Book of Documents, the classic of poetry, and the Book of Rites, the real-life equivalents of the three books cited in the Xing section in the game. In Genshin, Zhou is represented by Yongli rule and his Hou Yi domain, which is the third of the three divination texts in the Yi Jing after Guizang. Well, to Huo's credit of making a family-friendly version of history, at least in Genshin, Zhongli felt bad about people assuming that everything in there came from him and erasing his comrades' accomplishments. Incidentally, speaking of the Yi Jing, the trigrams in it are actually referenced in Songque's kit. Every single one of her skills is named after a trigram, which makes total sense since she is supposed to become the One Law. Her design also reflects the 5 elements, which are said to be the 5 colored stones that the goddess Niwa used to mend the heaven after a disaster destroyed the original pillars, or in this case, the nails. In contrast, her astral ring form is entirely gold, which reflects the myth of the carp turning into a dragon, and it's even the golden dragon for her, the color of heaven's imperial power. As a whole, her fight with perception in Dream Layer 1 is a nod to the upper line of Hexagram Kuan, the one in her astral ring activation. The upper line reads, "Dragons fight in the meadow. Their blood is black and yellow." And this exact line was also used in the ichor of 2 dragons animation for Daiheng and Anfeng. Pretty neat, right? Of the entire cast in Part 2, Songque is the one with symbolism most tightly connected to the first 3 dynasties of China, so she is actually mighty suspicious even beyond her role as Nuwa, sowing the sky in the Dream Layer 1. The next 3 periods of Mars, the Warring States, Jing, Yi, and Secondji, correlate to the Warring States, Spring and Autumn, Qin, Han, 3 Kingdoms, and Eastern Han. The Warring States being the Warring States are self-explanatory, albeit it seems it was smashed together with Spring and Autumn. Either way, the Jing dynasty, which is named after the Well Mansion in ancient astrology, unified China, as seen did the same in real life. Under the reign of Qin Shi Huang, replacing the multiple kings ruling their own fiefdom situations of the Warring States, the imperial system with a centralized emperor at the top was established, which became the basis for all Chinese imperial dynasties from Qin onward, and the exact same thing happened with Jing here. And like Qin in real life, Jing in Mars was overthrown by popular revolt because they were great at conquering and sucked at actually ruling. After a quick civil war, the Zhu-Han contention, Qin was replaced by Ravubong of the Han dynasty, which appeared here as Yi dynasty, which means the Wing's Mansion of ancient astrology. Like the Han dynasty of real life, Yi inherited the imperial system created by the predecessor it overthrew. Under the rule of the Yi dynasty, Mars underwent a significant agricultural revolution and a revolution in steelmaking. With its technological development and expansionist tendency, Yi became the hegemony on the Phoenix continent, and like the real-life Han dynasty, it also died to an economic crisis and a famine-causing revolt, which is the analog of Mars for Wangma's reign and the subsequent Red Eyebrows rebellion born from it. As the Yi dynasty fell into chaos, a marginal noble of Yi, or in other words, the Martian version of Lu Xiu, managed to gain the throne and established Martian Eastern Han as the second Yi dynasty. You see, the issue with this is that the 90% population as a death toll was way too high compared to the real thing. In real-life history, the Red Eyebrows Rebellion, even at its highest estimates, only caused around 29 million deaths, which was approximately 11.5% of the Han dynasty population at the time. While still a very staggering number, the 90% death toll is a very big red flag to us, as this is the first significant divergence in Martian history from real life. From the way the Honkai franchise likes to use Honkai as the cause for the fantasy versions of real-life events, such as the Black Death also being Honkai, tentatively, we can mark this as the possible start of Honkai usage by the Martian population, presumably by the Taoist factions, who have historically in Honkai world building confused Honkai energy with Si. At first, this divergence doesn't seem significant, but as the timeline progresses, you will see that this change created a chain reaction down the line. For now, regardless of the staggering death toll, the pace of technological development remained mostly the same. They still popularized papermaking on time, enabling literacy and education among the population. The next dynasty after Second Ji is the Bi dynasty, which is named after the Net Mansion in ancient Chinese astrology. From the way the Bi dynasty only had 3 emperors, I think it's pretty safe to say that it's the Martian version of Jin, which also only had 3 emperors before being splintered into Western Jin and Eastern Jin. However, the first odd thing here is that before the Jin dynasty, there should have been the Yellow Turban Rebellion and the Three Kingdoms era, which would cost approximately 34 million lives in real-world history. In contrast, the Three Kingdoms were skipped altogether and summed up as a reshuffling of the upper echelons of the empire that lasted for 30 Martian years, or 60 Earth years. The second odd thing is that pi was calculated to the 6th decimal during the Jin analog dynasty, but in real history, the number of pi was not calculated to the 6th decimal until the northern and southern dynasties, which should be at the very tail end of the second warring states on Mars. And it is here that things started to go visibly off the rail. In the Martian second warring state, the 16 kingdoms and northern and southern dynasties period were smashed together into the same period. The empire, long united, must divide. As 36 states rose and fell, the participants of the war on the Phoenix continent not only consisted of native Martians, but now also included newcomers from outside the Phoenix continent, the equivalents of the 5 barbarian forces in real-life history, only instead of Shanbri people, it was literal aliens. At the same time, people of the Phoenix continent started to establish colonies in the eastern and western isles on Mars, the region of Luni and Elysium. Of course, this Elysium is where the Elysium mythology took its name from, and Luni is the city where Antares was built, the opposition of Ares, the city that would later be split into Oxia and Longqiu of the first dream layer. Naturally, while the official record in the first dream layer didn't mention it, the people of Antares were of mixed heritage, and the Shanbri they were mixed with were, in fact, aliens from outer space with a vaguely Western culture, the lost tribe that spreads their civilization like dandelions under the guidance of the unwoven cocoon Senedina. According to Lidist, originally, Senedina, Lidist, and Nahabra came from a planet that once viewed the presumably Honkai as a blessing instead of a curse. Specifically, According to the story Seraphim wrote with Vita's hints in the Dream Layer 3, Layla was a simulation of the scientist who made the supercomputer, and the real scientist died long ago when she sent the supercomputer into space. Presumably, the original civilization of Senedina blew themselves up, leaving Senedina as the unwoven cocoon of their tribe. As Senedina rode on the spaceship to leave her original world, she continued to converse with the simulation of the scientist as if she were still alive, leaving recordings for the simulation Layla to listen to. When Senedina the deer and her friends from outer space arrived on Mars, she arrived at a forest and found a cute lion named Layla, but more realistically, she probably just fired up the Layla projection from the supercomputer. Together, Senedina the little deer and her friends, the cosmic dragon Nahabra and the big dog Litist, took care of the lion, hoping that one day the lion could be the true goddess of Mars. Layla and Senedina became very, very close friends, like Kiana and May type of close friends, if you get what I mean. As a young lion, Layla depended on Senedina for her worldview and pretty much her entire meaning for existence, but Senedina hinted several times that she would leave one day, even if she would forever stay close to Layla. Together, they planted a tree, which would eventually become the uprooted tree that the people of Wangshu worshipped. Initially, Antares, Layla, and Senedina's city existed independently from the mess in the political center of the Phoenix continents. However, the empire, long divided, must unite. As the dust settled, a new dynasty emerged as the sole power in the Phoenix continent, the Xihe dynasty, which is also named after a Chinese mansion and a reference to the Xihe dynasty. Like the Xihe dynasty in real life, Xihe imperial exams, using merit as a yardstick for a government job rather than limiting everything to the nobility. In addition, woodblock printing was also used to print Buddhist scriptures and historical records. Of course, now with alien texts, the timeline has been thrown into the trash can, and the Martian Xihe dynasty lasted nearly 10 times as long as the Xihe dynasty in real life, bringing about presumably a lot of aggregated technological achievements that weren't supposed to happen in the proper timeline. Of course, the one rule that stays true is that the empire, long united, must divide. The Xihe transition manifested as the 10 Dynasties period on Mars, with presumably many of the same events, albeit somehow they got gunpowder roughly 400 years before the actual date in real Earth history, where gunpowder was only invented in the 9th century during the Kong Dynasty. But like real life, an empire, long divided, must unite. At the end of the Martian equivalent of the Xihe transition, gunpowder and all, the Taiyi Empire emerged as the Kong Dynasty analog of Mars. Initially established on the Tarsus Highlands in the north, the Empire of Hou Yi was under the reign of Prince Lodi, who was of mixed heritage of both Phoenix continent and Arcadia. In other words, he was the Martian version of the Yan, the founder of the real-life Kong Dynasty of similarly mixed Han and Qianbei ancestry. They also brought vast lands of Olympus, Luni, and Elysium under their rule, creating the largest empire in history at the twilight of the Arcadian Age. The Arcadian-based Yi Empire had far-reaching effects on the material culture of the Phoenix continent. The empire's innovative governance system forced a reshuffle among the intellectual class, objectively providing opportunities for the prosperity of the artist class. The systems of traditional opera and novels in the Phoenix continent took shape during this period. Additionally, the Taiyi Empire was the world's earliest regime to establish a currency system centered around paper money, which was actually a reference to Dong Dynasty's flying money system. Yet this forward-thinking financial system also gave rise to economic disasters in the empire's later years, and by later years, they probably mean Song Dynasty. Regardless, Taiyi has the exact same characters as the Chinese name of Ena, the Aeon of Order in Honkai Star Rail. As the Phoenix Continent book has noted, Taiyi broke away from the tradition by naming itself after a star and a god instead of the traditional 28 Chinese mansions. As a god in real life, Kaiyi creates water. Kaiyi Songque is one of the oldest known creation myths in Taoism, describing the creation of water, heaven and earth, yin and yang by the supreme god Kaiyi, representing the path of the void. Now you know why Ena's curse turns people into bugs filled with orange juice during swarm. Taiyi creates water, and the water is Tang. However, like any empire in the world, Before the Xihe Empire could reach their height, they had to step on other people's cities first, and in this case, it was Senedina and Layla's and Terry's that was on the chopping block. According to the brief history of Oxia, in the year 1683 of the old calendar, Antares city was destroyed by the Taiyi Empire, but later rebuilt. In 1750s, Hou Yi fell into an economic crisis and was overthrown by popular revolt. In the year 1758 of the old calendar, as Yi fell into chaos from presumably the Martian revolt, the Antares region separated from the Taiyi Empire and established a city-state. In 1759, the Xihe Empire was officially established and the Antares Republic declared permanent neutrality. As the successor state of the Martian dynasty, the Xihe dynasty is an obvious shoo-in for the Song dynasty. Like the real-life Song dynasty, the Xihe dynasty emphasized on wealth and financial might, having all the hallmarks of an emerging modern society. Albeit in real life, the Song dynasty missed the ride to industrialization and lost their chance forever with the rise of the Mongol Empire. Like Hou Yi Empire before them, Xihe was not named after one of the 28 traditional Chinese mansions, but was named after a deity and a star. In mythologies, Xihe is the goddess of the sun and the mother of the 10 suns. In some versions of the story, before Hou Yi shot down 9 suns, there were 10 suns in the sky. Each sun was a golden 3-legged crow, and all were children of Xihe. As the 10 suns ravaged the mortal world and created droughts, the hero archery shot down 9 suns, leaving only one in the sky. And when you compare this myth with the version of the Tenzu story told by Songque in the first Dream Layer, you'll see that her story is basically a reverse of this myth, with the 7 Suo rising up to gain the power of the sun and defeating the shadows instead of causing droughts. And if you pay even closer attention to the accompanying animation, you'll realize that the symbol of the 7 Su, the sun disk, is actually an exact copy of the 3-legged sun crow dug up in real-life ancient Su kingdom. In other words, the Su are effectively the 10 sun crows, only that in the first Dream Layer, 3 are missing from the 10 Shu War. The astral rings are broken pieces of a single sun disk, and as the story has hinted to us during the fight against Lantern and Senedina's exhaustion in Chapter 3, this power of the astral ring is the power of Senedina, the Martian goddess of the day, the contrast to Layla, the goddess of the night, and in the narrative told to us in the Layer 1 history book, the goddess of the Sun Xihe of the Xihe Empire. Unrelated, but I find it incredibly funny how Helia, one of the 2 Earth Valkyries accompanying the Dreamseeker, is named after Helios, the Greek god of the sun. You see, in the story of Chapter 7, she is actually playing the role of Hou Yi, the one shooting down 9 out of 10 suns, and her weapon is a crossbow gun. After her not-girlfriend took a spear for her and seemingly died in the dream, Helia went very Sayaka and became very mentally unstable. In her rage, she actually hijacked the 33rd War, the one that was originally supposed to blow up into something big in the original timeline, and blew her way into Mu. There, she sought the method to immortality from Layla, the god that had turned to stone, and swore to shoot down any god or mortal standing in her way. In the real-life myth, Hou Yi shot down 9 suns and only left one behind, and for his action, he was rewarded the elixir of immortality by the Western Mother Goddess, who is basically Senedina on Mars. When he took the elixir of immortality home, his wife Kummer drank it for one reason or another, flying to the moon and becoming the moon goddess in the process. Only that in Mars, the proverbial Western Mother Goddess is missing, and there was no pill of immortality as a reward for Hou Yi, and Coralie stayed dead. It's up in the air as to what she will do afterwards and whether she will shoot down any of the Sun Crow, the Tensu, in the 33rd War, but at least I found that part of the story incredibly funny because Helia herself is also a sun on Mars. Anyway, the next dynasty to replace Xihe was Wangshu. Yes, like the Wangshu in Genshin. In real-life myth, Wangshu is the goddess of the moon and an exoplanet. In fact, Wangshu is the first exoplanet that Chinese astrologers discovered, so it was a big thing back then. In real life, Wangshu as an exoplanet orbits the star Xihe, the one that became the namesake of Xihe dynasty above, and in myth, Wangshu is the goddess with the moon chariot, riding across the sky, every night as a parallel to Xihe riding her sun chariot across the sky every day. As a dynasty on Mars, we know very little about Wangshu, other than that it's more akin to a modern industrial nation than it is to the old dynasties of the imperial era. In other words, it's fantasy Martian Ming dynasty, which was also a hair strand away from industrialization and its own industrial revolution, but somehow managed to miraculously dodge it. Needless to say, this is a paper-thin disguise of the reign of Layla, during the time period that took place into None May God Pray, in which the citizens were living in a pseudo-imperial reign of a god. And that period is a stark difference from the following eras of the Sue Wars, which were effectively self-running without its gods and visibly transforming slowly into a modern industrialized society. Also, there's a literal giant moon in Layla's design. It would be a bit odd if the Wangshu moon goddess of this dynasty wasn't actually Layla, just as how it would be a bit ridiculous if Xihe, the mother of the 10 sun crows, wasn't Ena, the origin of the astral ring system used by the Sioux. Regardless, according to a brief history of Oxia, Anteri survived as an independent state until the year 2185 of the old calendar, when the Great Eruption occurred and the 7 Shu split Antares into Oxia and Longzhou. Except, this is obviously not the truth, considering that their historical records show possible traces of Honkai energy usage ever since the Bi dynasty. The story plot about bargaining with the shadows in Dream Layer 1 obviously didn't come from nowhere. The whole China, once united, must divide. Once divided, must unite, is used here to reflect the cycle of civilization and Honkai, as Hou Yi has stated to us in her book Way in Dream Layer 1. According to the hypothesis about the Great Eruption, we can think of Honkai energy as a byproduct of civilization, but fundamentally, its source may be anti-space. How should we understand this anti-space? Perhaps everyone has seen this type of painting. The water was lifted from low to high by water wheels, only to cascade down again, driving their rotation and perpetuating the cycle. It was already absurd, but shifting focus from the flow to the structure revealed twisted pillars of the aqueduct, defying reality. The concept of anti-space, or imaginary space, is akin to these pillars that defy existence in reality. It fundamentally opposes our physical constants, our real world. Phenomena impossible in reality might be commonplace on that side. In connection to the hypothesis regarding the Great Eruption, as our civilization continues to evolve, accumulating negative entropy within its internal cycle, the corresponding imaginary internal energy, or Honkai energy, also rises in tandem. And also because, they're all inside a simulation in a computer. As in, their planet died long ago, when a protoplanet smashed to it in the Southern Giant Impact, the one shown to us right at the start in Dream Layer 0, and the one that Ena witnessed. So evidently, at one point in time, presumably around the time of the Xihe Empire, long before the 2185 date of the Great Eruption, or should we say, the 33rd War, given to us by the Dream Layer 1 book, a Southern Giant did, in fact, smashed into Mars, turning the planet into an ocean of magma, which, presumably, made it utterly inhospitable to life. Likely as a last-ditch effort to save Mars civilization, Ena sacrificed people's memories of her and her own existence to kickstart the supercomputer she carried over from her home planet, plunging the last echoes of Mars civilization into the sea of data. At the same time, she left the control of the computer, the anchor of Apocalypse and the astral ring system, the white crown of the White Star Princess in Seraphim's Layer 3 story, to Layla, the Black Star Princess who wants to resurrect the dead, who started the entire plot of Part 2 with the Dream Seeker system, the Martian's eternal return. And thus, this is our story, Layla the Technician's story, to find her very own Noi lambent again across space and time, as the Elysium mythology has foretold us right in Chapter 1. As I have mentioned in my previous video, historically, Hou Yi has conflated two different concepts of samsara under the same umbrella. On one hand, you have the samsara on Earth in Honkai 3, where people are only parallels of the past but are not exact parallels of the past. Kiana and May of the current era are effectively a mix and match of the relationship between Kevin and Dr. May and between Eden and Alicia. This is also the definition of samsara used in Amphoreus for the generations of Titans, which are inexact parallels of the previous generations. Castorice and Polixia are different people, after all. On the other hand, you have Honkai 2 samsara, which is actually Nietzsche's concept of an eternal return, basically a big Groundhog Day loop. Era 0 Kiana is literally just Kiana, and for Amphoreus, this is Reaver traveling back in time to kill his past self Emiya style. And for Mars, it is Nietzsche's eternal return that is in use here rather than Honkai 3 Earth's parallelism. Fundamentally, both Mars and Amphoreus took heavy inspiration from Asimov's The End of Eternity, in which the eternity is pitched against the infinity, and you must delete the eternity, break open the loop, for the infinite future to arrive. And for both Mars and Amphoreus, this means taking control of the computer, seizing authority from the gods, and setting free the Noi Lambent of the story, as Senedina and Cyrene respectively. That said, while Mars and Amphoreus have many similarities, they're not exactly the same, and some roles have been scrambled as they are changed to fit Chinese mythologies and Greco-Roman Orphic Cimmerian mythologies respectively. While in Mars, Layla is the crying lion and Senedina is the sacrificial deer, in Amphoreus, their closest equivalents, MC and Cyrene, are a trash panda and an ice block butterfly respectively. Or well, probably a butterfly, whatever animal meme is at least. Her voice sounds close enough to the underworld butterfly, so maybe. At the same time, the roles of the lion and the sacrificial scapegoat are repeated again between the blind lion and the golden scapegoat, just reversed because it's the golden scapegoat going back in time instead of the blind lion. So effectively for Amphoreus, you have two pairs of equivalents to Noi Lambent and the technician Harlan, to Senedina and Layla, not only one pair. At the same time, Songque's role was also split off between the MC and Phanon as the gatherer of the core flames, the astral ring systems, to recreate the one law of the golden scapegoat again, a fact that was reflected in their overlapping figure in the Nameless Faces song. As such, I would caution against the expectation that they would be exactly the same, just that Mars, Amphoreus, and Elysian Realm are all different takes by the same writers from the same works, The End of Eternity, All the Troubles of the World, Nietzsche, and The Inception, so a few plot points and symbolism are likely to repeat, such as the eternal return and the sacrificial scapegoat plot points. That and, well, God is dead, God remains dead, and Asu XP with Buddhism theme is going to try to steal their authority to escape the samsara. After all, it is his fate to transcend the peaks of purity and return to corruption and hardship, and it is her plan to escape from that system, from that boring, predetermined universe. That, too.